Hi, I'm Vinny Corbo, artist and producer here in Los Angeles, and today we're going to find out if it's really worth the extra money to hire a professional bass player, even if you can already play the bass very well. So today we have Andrew Hill, a professional bass player who I've hired many times. He's played on several of my albums, done live shows with me, and he's also tracked bass on some albums I've produced. He's going to come in, take a listen to what I've recorded, evaluate my bass track, tell me what's good, tell me what could be improved, and then he's going to lay one down and basically educate us on how it can be better. And let's find out, is it that much better, and is it worth the money? All right, so I don't need to come in right from the beginning. So, first impressions.
The tone and recording sounds really good.
Yeah. What do you think? I like the color.
So the chart. I'll hold that up so you can see, or maybe you could just put in a.
Yeah, I'll drop it in. Yeah.
So the chart has nothing written, right? It's
right.
it's just all slashes. We're only looking at chord changes,
Right?
And we've got like a very old school, like, boogie style bass line arpeggiated the whole time, right? Which is a good starting point. But I think what like kind of drives the bass line a little bit more and adds a little bit more flavor to it is breaking away from the arpeggios sometimes and incorporating some more bass specific vocabulary, which is a lot of like walk-ups, lead-ins, octave skipping, things like that.
Okay. And are those chromatic lead-ins?
Yes, sure, yeah.
Or scalar lead-ins, both?
Could be both. I mean, in a piece like this, where the chord changes are pretty simple, you could get away with a lot of different stuff. I would probably do both. The scale lead-ins, I would try to aim those at the beginnings and ends of phrases, and the chromatic ones sort of more in the middle of phrases.
So when a person is thinking about the changes, should they be thinking about, okay, I'm on the G minor, and I'm going to the C. Are you always thinking about where you're going? Meaning at least halfway through the measure, you're like, I got to get to the C, so I got to get there in a creative way?
Pretty much always. Okay. And, so a 2-5-1 like we have here, a G minor to a C to an F. So like a very, very common bass line to go to G minor to C is to play G, A, B flat, B natural, C.
Okay.
Now, B natural is obviously not in a G minor chord. It's the major third over a minor chord, which in theory is extremely wrong, right? But in the operation of bass, that chromatic lead-in sounds very, very nice.
And we call that integrity of the line, right?
Yeah. When you listen to how it is in the context, especially if we're doing this 2-5, and then we go from the bass line I just said, G, A, B flat, B natural, C, and then we do it again up a fourth to lead into F, C, D, E flat, E natural, F. Again, we're putting an E flat on a C major chord, okay. The minor third in the major chord. Technically wrong, right? But in the context of that chromatic movement, sounds really good.
And also we're talking about over a sort of, blues, you have a little more...
Yeah, you do. You definitely in a blues, you have all kinds of leeway that you can take with that. But I mean, in jazz walking in general, a chromatic half-step approach to the chord before will pretty much always sound really good no matter where you're coming from or what you're doing. We've got, in kind of the bridge of this piece, a B7 chord that leads into an F. I mean, I would approach this F chromatically both from the top and the bottom, which would mean like the note before being either an E natural or a F sharp, a G flat. Neither of which are in the B flat chord, but coming from a chromatic approach just always sounds really nice in this context.
Okay, great. So now this song is a blues, so it's got basic chords,
yeah.
Major, minor, and 7.
Mm-hmm.
And you're talking about jazz. So if there was, jazz, we have 11s and 13s and sharp 9s. By having the extra notes in the chord, does that give you more space to do those kinds of things where it's like, oh, well, I know what the sharp 9 is, so as I'm walking up, I should hit the sharp 9?
Honestly, with bass, it kind of doesn't matter that much.
Okay.
I would honestly, if this chord were B7 altered to or B flat 7 altered to like a B diminished to F sharp 7 sharp 11, I actually would approach it the same way as it's written right now.
Okay.
In bass, it kind of, you're not dealing too much with the extensions in the walking lines, or at least I'm not thinking about it. I'm really thinking about how to get from root to root. And the only time I'm would start thinking about notes that are not the root or the fifth is if I wanted to add variety by playing like a third or a different chord tone. I will say, like, the further away you get from like the overtone, the overtone series. So the overtone series is first the element, the root, the fundamental, that's what's called, the fundamental pitch, and then the next is an octave up from that, and then the next is a fifth up from that. Okay. Right? And so those are the first three tones in the overtone series. And when you're playing a low pitched instrument, and you're playing at the bottom of the sort of spectrum of where the notes are in the songs, the further you get away from your fundamentals and the overtones, the weirder it sounds, and the more like non-coherent it sounds, which is why you do it sparingly. And especially with like old school music like this, old school boogie, I would really, really, really probably avoid it for most of this. Okay. If we were doing like a more jazz approach where I was, thinking a little bit more modern, or even, just quartet, small ensemble, Miles Davis quartet kind of thing, I would do it a lot more. But in kind of an old school driving, more, boogie rock focused, I'm not going to do it as much. I'm primarily concerned with just hitting my root notes when the chord changes and approaching them. Now, if you do have something like this, where you have a chord that is more than one bar, right? Like we have F for 4 bars, I would maybe start mixing it in some of the mid bars, so I'm not just hitting F every time. Right. F, Yeah. C, the fifth, obviously, and then the next overtone, A. As a third, that's probably where I'm going. And then another thing you can do is, like, for example, you have like this F7 leading into this B flat 7. A lot of times what bass players will do, or not just bass players, but any sort of jazz rhythm section player, is imply changes to get you to B flat. So you have the 5 chord of B flat right here, F, right? So instead of playing F right here, I might play a C on beat 1 and then an F on beat 3, and so that's implying the C minor chord to the F. It's the 2-5 back into B flat, right? Yeah. So I'll do stuff like that to break up the line. But like I said, primarily I'm just concerned with leading from chord to chord.
Okay. I'm also concerned about the feel, because with these you want to swing. Let me just isolate the drums. So is that kind of a lean?
It's on top of the beat for sure.
Yeah, that's where I want it.
Yeah.
This is what I came up with. I'm able to use the C to the F to walk straight up to the F, and now I hang on the octave. And I can, and the reason I'm hanging on that is because listen to what the rest of especially the piano player is doing. He's got a solo. So just to give it a little bit of tension. Now, is that a good idea?
Of course, that is probably like my number one bass trick. If you're a bass player, here's a little bass trick. If you ever think that the audience is not paying attention, or you want to lock them back in, what you do is when you're going to a new section, such as a solo or a verse or something, go way up high and bring the volume down and start pedaling, just like you did on your recording, right? Okay. What that does is it refocuses the energy. The whole band will go like this. The drummer, everybody will all of a sudden come way in. Okay. If you're playing quietly with intensity, and then when you get to the 4 chord here, you go back down and you unleash, and that sort of adds a lift to it. Okay. And I've done this, where I've done a whole chorus of just staying way up high, pedaling one note, and really letting the energy simmer, and then bring it back down, to when we're going back to a new section or to the top of the solo form. And a lot of times audiences will actually applaud after that happens. Wow. Okay. They don't know why they're applauding, but they are. That said, let's get Andy plugged in. He's going to track this. We'll record him doing it, and then we'll talk about what's different, and we can take a look at what he did. We'll kind of analyze it. All right, so got the sheet music, chord changes. Andy is tuned up.
did the same thing too, where on this measure where blum.
Yeah.
Why did we do that? I did it too, and I did it instinctively. Sort of why?
Right.
Why?
Because I could tell this is a big like band hit, right? And we've been playing, soloing and playing other stuff up until then. And so, like, when I have my 5-string and I know I can get that low note, I think it sounds really good because I'm going for the full harmonic structure, right? I'm going to be way down here. I know the piano is going to be like here, and I know I'm going to have horns way up, right? So I know that that's the structure of what the chord is going to sound like. So I just want to give it like a huge bass. Okay. As the listener, too, like, it just kicks him in the ass really hard when you drop a super low note in there.
And I also like the cartoony effect. Like that to me, that's what what I think. I think I'm blonde. Yeah. Because that's where you are.
Totally.
And then to show you how good he is, like this last line at measure 73, there's a line that everybody plays. And it took me, I had to stop and then punch that in because I was like, wait a minute. And he just read it right down. Mm-hmm. Is it perfect? We'll check. But when I did my part, I did that high F at the beginning of Ciege's solo because he's doing all that weird shit. You waited till the middle. Is that a wiser thing to do? Because
so if you're playing live, that'd be something that was maybe pre-communicated via a look or something like that. So he comes out of his solo burning, right?
Yeah.
Can you maybe just roll a little bit of his solo?
Here we go into it. We're halfway in the middle,
yeah. Okay, cool. So we're in the studio, so I knew that was coming, right? I knew his solo was going to sound like that. If you're coming out throwing flames like that, I'm not going to go high and doing pedals right away because I feel like that energy needs support.
Okay.
Especially he's way up high on the piano. He's doing a lot of glisses. He's going blah, blah, a lot of that. So what he needs in that moment, I think, from the bass player is just a lot of groove and support behind him. If he had started the solo quieter with maybe like a very simple idea that he was going to develop throughout the solo, to me that makes a little bit more sense to sort of bring the energy in. But I knew because obviously his solo's already recorded, I knew he was coming out spitting flames, so I just wanted to make sure that he's got the drums and the bass behind him while he's doing that.
And in live, what I feel happens sometimes, especially when we're playing with a soloist, or even if I'm on the drums, and someone starts going, he's hitting hard in the beginning, but if we kind of jump in with him, even as the drums are going, you're kind of accenting him. Are you
sure,
or are you just still walking?
The answer is going to vary a little bit from bass player to bass player, but I typically will try to hold together the form as much as I can. This kind of depends who you're playing with.
Yeah.
You don't want the groove and the time and the form to start getting away from you because as soon as that happens, then people get confused and they're looking around like, where are we? What are we doing?
Remember you were talking about going to a chord. Show just quick illustration of what you're talking about.
Sure. So 2-5-1, most common chord progression in jazz, and in our case G minor to C to F. Probably one of the most common things to do on bass. I start here in my G. Then I'm going to take the same exact, now I'm on C, take the same exact pattern to get to F. Okay? I'm not concerned with the chord tones. I understand that I'm playing a major third on a minor chord and a minor third on a major chord.
It's a passing tone.
But they're passing tones and they're that's just kind of how jazz bass works. Yep. Yeah. I love in my bass lines continuity like that. You're here in the track. I did stuff like this in the solo section when we were going F to B flat, something like this.
Yeah.
And then when we went to B flat, I'm doing the same thing. Back to F. So I love having little continuity things like that, where it's not just notes up and down randomly wherever, having little phrases like that built into your bass lines makes it more interesting.
And you're hitting on that one. You're hitting the 4.
Yeah. So what I just did, I'm only going between the 1 chord F and the 4 chord B flat. So my pattern is 1 F, and then I'm going 7 6 5 E flat D C. Right, kind of that thing.
Oh, I see.
Same pattern on B flat. Back to F. Right. So I'm just and then like it. Those are all pretty much in the chord tone. There's nothing like crazy happening there. In like blues and boogie and stuff, that flat, emphasizing that flat 7 is like a really cool thing to do. I think like you can even do it. You probably heard me do something like this too. Like that's just straight up chromatic. I'm just going from the F, dropping down to D, and then just chromatically back up. B flat, same exact pattern, right? Little things like that.
Okay, cool. And because CH piano player often tells me like I'll be hit, even though the 7 isn't written.
Yeah.
He'll be
so in jazz, yeah, a lot of time. Now there are some cases where you wouldn't want to do that if it was like a more pop thing, or if we are getting like legit like cartoony music and we want to really really keep it. Then I would like, if you had given me a direction as a producer before we did this, is like, look, this is for a spot where it needs to be super cartoony, so my bass line would have just kind of been like, right, I would just be doing that the whole time. But because I know that this does have a little bit more jazz essence to it, then I felt comfortable taking some of the jazz liberties. Another one that I did a lot in that track is the turnaround back to the top of the solo form, where we have written just 2 bars of F, right? That goes back to the solo.
Okay.
What I was doing a ton was implying a turnaround of F to D to G to C back to F. The 1 6 2 5, a very powerful chord progression. I was implying it all the time because what it does is it turns the form back over. It's very useful for the soloist and other people in the rhythm section just to get an idea of what the form is. So to demonstrate it, the last 4 bars of the solo form. Now I'm going to do 1 6 2 5 back to the top of the form, right? It's not written. And and technically, the piano player might not necessarily be doing those changes with me all the time, but having the bass do it just loops it back to the top really nicely.
That's great. So there is many benefits to hiring a professional, even if you can play the bass well. I'm in time, got a nice tone. I didn't play anything wrong. I'm nice and ahead of the beat, which is what you're supposed to be on a tune like this. But then if you hire someone, that's the difference. And that's why I'm always saying, even if you can do it, still pay for it, because it'll up the quality of your music by a lot.